Hello, how you doing? My name is Antonio. My page is Unapologetically Black ADOS. Ask that you like and subscribe to my page. Today what I want to discuss with you is you're witnessing the fall of democracy and you're seeing America's first clear Russian Manchurian candidate invoke Russia in the opinion in the 2024 election after the Robert Mueller investigation into the Donald Trump Russian collusion in the 2016 election.
We're like a rocket ship. It was like a rocket ship sent by Kim Jong-un, just like that. Who was very nice, I will tell you. He's not so fond of this administration, but he's fond of me, and we had a very good relationship. Vladimir Putin of Russia says that Biden's, and this is a quote, politically motivated persecution of his political rival is very good for Russia because it shows the rottenness of the American political system.
Yes, I know he talked repeatedly about that being a witch hunt, but let's be clear. Many of the people around him were convicted for collusion with the Russians. Let's be clear. There was also a group of Russian spies who was also indicted in America for collusion or involvement in our elections. And their actions was meant to favor Donald Trump. So ask yourself, why was it or why is it that the Russians feel that a Donald Trump presidency benefits them?
They had a lead on what would become the biggest story yet. They had discovered another meeting between the Trump campaign and the Russians.
My colleagues and I have been doing some reporting on this. The idea that there was another Russian meeting that we didn't totally understand, that had been undisclosed during the campaign.
They learned Donald Trump Jr. had hosted the meeting with a Russian lawyer, Natalia Veselnitskaya. Also in the room, Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and campaign chairman Paul Manafort. The Times wanted a comment from the president, who was traveling on Air Force One.
That at the front of Air Force One, Hope Hicks and President Trump are kind of working on this statement.
The president had taken charge of writing the response.
White House responds to a report in the New York Times that claims Donald Trump,
Trump's statement, written for his son, said the meeting was about adoption of Russian orphans.
It was a short introductory meeting. I asked Jared and Paul to stop by. We primarily discussed a program about the adoption of Russian children.
But there was a reason for the meeting that the president's statement did not mention.
For Donald Trump to claim that his meeting with the Russians was about adopting Russian babies and his entire campaign is about immigrants poisoning America, we have to understand what is the difference. Is he talking about immigrants of melanated people? That is the difference. But that was all just a lie to cover up the fact that Russia was actually working to put him in a position into presidency. Why would he lie and cover up the fact that Russia was working to put him into presidency? Because he don't want it to be uncovered why Russia would do this. What would it benefit Russia for him to be in office? And why would Russia be so sure that Donald Trump would do their bidding? Because Russia has been financially pumping Donald Trump up for decades.
Days that followed, the New York Times discovered a series of emails setting up the meeting.
Another day, another installment.
The next day we reported that what had actually happened is that Don Jr. had been promised dirt on Hillary Clinton by this Russian lawyer.
The Crown Prosecutor of Russia offered to provide the Trump campaign with some official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary and her dealings with Russia and would be very useful to your father.
In the email setting up the meeting, Don Jr. was told that this meeting was part of the Russian government's efforts to support now President Trump.
This is obviously very high-level and sensitive information, but is part of Russia and its government support for Mr. Trump.
I mean, I remember saying, oh my God, it says it in an email?
Many people don't understand the significance of this because many of people have bit into the illusion that Donald Trump was self-made. But if you're a person like me who seriously follow politics, then you will understand that that is not the case. And you will also understand that Donald Trump's actions were beneficial to Russia the entire time he was in the White House. I did a video explaining this. Russia had been propping Donald Trump up for decades, preparing Donald Trump to get in office. Donald Trump had a strong stance against NATO. What is NATO? The North Atlantic Treaty Organization that is meant to prevent Russia aggression from trying to annex or take over other European countries. Understand, you see Russia working to benefit and get Trump in office, and then this is the policies that he presents to America that are beneficial to Russia. Trump, as I said in a previous video, Trump also placed Iran under sanctions when Iran was in compliance with the energy agreement they had signed with the UN. Why would placing Iran under sanctions benefit Russia is because Russia had intended to apply its aggression to Ukraine, and how would the war be funded? It would be funded through the sale of oil. So by lowering the supply, that increases the value of Russian oil. Donald Trump also did tariffs on Canada, and Canada is the world's fifth largest oil producer. So he put tariffs on, he put the 7th largest oil producer, Iran, under sanctions, prevented them from being able to have oil on the world market. He also, at the expense of America, he also placed Canada under sanctions, under tariffs, right? Canada is the 5th largest oil producer. America get 92% of Canada's oil, right? And we put it in our refineries. You can do your research and look it up, right? And we sell it back. So these things, these actions he did was harmful to America, these policies, but they were beneficial to the Russian government because also Canada is one of the world's biggest aluminum producer, and if you look it up, Russia is one of the world's biggest aluminum producer. So what Trump did was he raised the economic war on various countries that competed with Russia in various markets. But he acted as if those tariffs was to benefit the American worker, but there was no surplus in the American workers. There was only a decrease. There was only a harm to the American workers.
Don Jr. right back in an email, if it's what you say, I love it.
I love it, especially later in the summer.
Coming on top of everything else that had come out about all these Russian contacts with the campaign, the Trump Tower email trail was incredibly damning.
There's no ambiguity about this. This is there in black and white. And whatever they actually talked about in the meeting, the advertised intent of the meeting was collusion.
For his part, the president would downplay the importance of the meeting.
Nothing happened from the meeting. Zero happened from the meeting. And honestly, I think the press made a very big deal over something that really a lot of people would do.
Now we've got another email.
But Special Counsel Robert Mueller was paying close attention.
The laws in this country are very clear. It is absolutely forbidden for a foreign government or a foreign person from taking part in a domestic campaign. So it is, I can understand entirely why the Mueller team is focused on that meeting.
We've now learned there could have been at least...
Which repeatedly broke this law. Did he not ask Russia for the Hillary emails? Donald Trump repeatedly asked for outside interference from Russia in the 2016 election. And Donald Trump is currently doing it in the 2024 election. He's currently invoking Russia's opinion on the 2024 election, even after all of his Russian collusion connections were exposed in the prior election that he won. And his audience, his supporters, are not intelligent enough or don't care enough about democracy in order to rebuke Donald Trump.
I'll tell you this, Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press. Let's see if that happens. That'll be next. Yes, sir.
Special counsel Robert Mueller has issued subpoenas
this morning, unsealing a guilty plea.
Trump campaign foreign policy aide George Papadopoulos pled guilty to lying about Russian contacts.
The former Trump aide George Papadopoulos has pleaded guilty to making false statements.
Trump's campaign chairman Paul Manafort and his deputy Rick Gates were indicted on numerous charges ranging from conspiracy to money laundering.
Manafort and his former business associate Rick Gates were told to surrender to federal authorities this morning.
Michael Flynn pled guilty to that charge of lying to the FBI.
White House National Security Advisor Michael Flynn has pleaded guilty.
Let's be clear, the Mueller investigation into collusion between the Russians and the Trump campaign interfering in Americans' election resulted in multiple convictions. It resulted in guilty pleas, not just on the exchange of information, but on exchange of money. You understand that his campaign manager was selected to him by the Russians, and he was convicted of money laundering, receiving money from a foreign agency and not disclosing that to the government. This was Donald Trump campaign manager, and if you do your research, he was selected by other people. So let's understand that Donald Trump was a Manchurian candidate for the Russians, and his continuing to invoke the Russians and people being ignorant to this shows you that white America is willing to relinquish our democracy in order to get an authoritarian government so that they can oppress people of color.
In Washington, fascinating. Let's listen in.
11 of the defendants are charged with conspiring to hack into computers, steal documents, and release those documents with the intent to interfere in the election.
Rod Rosenstein came out and said, we have identified Russian GRU officers down to the offices where they sat and their exact names.
According to the allegation,
it was a remarkable moment.
The defendants worked for 2 units of the main intelligence directorate of the Russian General Staff, known as the GRU.
It is by far the most extensive evidence laid out publicly that almost makes it irrefutable that Russia did do this.
The indictments were the work of special counsel Robert Mueller.
After a year of listening to Trump say this is all a witch hunt, this is all fake news, nothing is real, there was no collusion, Here's Mueller's answer. Oh, really? Look at this. Look what we have.
When we confront foreign interference in American elections, it's important for us to avoid thinking politically as Republicans or Democrats, and instead to think patriotically as Americans.
Rosenstein, I'm quite sure, enjoy.
Let's be clear. The United States government has indicted Russian officials for interfering in the American election. The U.S. government that Donald Trump is the president of has indicted these Russian spies, and yet Donald Trump will stand up in front of Putin and say he trusts Putin over his own agencies. This should tell you Donald Trump was a Manchurian candidate for the Russians.
Mr. President, you tweeted this morning that it's U.S. foolishness, stupidity, and the Mueller probe that is responsible for the decline in U.S. relations with Russia.
Yeah, I hold both countries responsible. I think that the United States has been foolish. I think we've all been foolish.
He launches into a monologue, a rampage about we're to blame, the Russians might be to blame, but we're also to blame.
I think that the probe is a disaster for our country. I think it's kept us apart. It's kept us separated. There was no collusion at all. Everybody knows it.
President Putin denied having anything to do with the election interference in 2016. Every U.S. intelligence agency has concluded that Russia did. My first question for you, sir, is who do you believe?
Who do you believe? That's the starkest possible way to put that question to the president.
My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be.
This was somebody who only days after an indictment against Russian military officials appeared to be siding with a foreign country as opposed to the conclusions of U.S. intelligence and U.S. law enforcement.
Let's be clear. I don't want to hear any of this. Donald Trump will stand up to Putin. You're watched in real time as Donald Trump bowed down to Putin. You watch Donald Trump refuse to rebuke his benefactor because the Russians have been financing Donald Trump and the Donald Trump organization for decades. This is why he had to lie about the intent of the meeting at the Trump White House with the Russians. It's because he don't want you to look into the financing of the Trump organization.
I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today.
But if you listen to his words, he's saying, well, my intelligence chief, Dan Coates, comes to me and says this, but Putin has told me very strongly that he didn't do it. When Trump uses the words very strongly, he's using an adjective to him that means almost more than anything.
When Donald Trump says Putin gave him a strong no, that means that Donald Trump's saying he was too weak to refute what Putin was saying, regardless of the evidence that was presented by his own intelligence agencies. Because Donald Trump is indebted to Putin. If you don't understand this by now, then you have no business speaking on politics.
Here's Mueller has convinced yet another witness to
investigation heating up on several fronts.
Trump tried to walk back some of his remarks, but in the months that followed,
Conspiracy theory, deep state, the things
Mueller would close in on the president's inner circle.
campaign chief faces
Paul Manafort,
18 counts of
guilty,
financial crimes.
sentenced to prison.
Paul Manafort, convicted in federal court on financial
We got the guilty verdict in the Paul Manafort case.
Michael Cohen, guilty, and in testimony implicating implicated the president.
Former lawyer implicating him in campaign finance
Longtime associate of President Trump indicted overnight.
The president's longtime political advisor, Roger Stone, indicted.
And indicted by a grand jury.
After almost 2 years, Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation has resulted in 37 indictments or guilty pleas and 199 criminal charges.
Robert Mueller, the investigation is now over.
And now, with Mueller's report complete,
This is an important moment for the Trump presidency.
the president and the nation wait.
The White House has not been briefed.
Democrats may have a very different take on the findings in that report.